Hello, this is Paul Dunham. Welcome back to the channel. In recent years, the Ukrainian model company ICM has been in the practice of issuing figure kits to accompany many of their aircraft, armor, and automotive kits. Even more recently, ICM has begun packaging sets of paints for finishing specific kits in their range. One of ICM's newest releases is the set of 5 1/48 scale figures to accompany their new KI-21 Sally kits. They've also recently issued an acrylic paint set for painting Japanese pilots and ground crew. The figure kit, World War II Japanese pilots and ground personnel, and the paint set, World War II Japanese pilots acrylic paint set, are sold separately, but I will review both of them in this video. The figure kit includes 3 Japanese Army aircrew figures and 2 ground crew figures. The 3 aircrew are dressed in flight gear, 2 are in relaxed standing poses, and the 3rd is saluting. 1 ground crew figure is at attention and saluting, and the other is carrying a ladder. The kit includes 1 tree of plastic parts protected by a resealable plastic bag. The instructions are a single 8.5 by 11 inch sheet with a construction and painting guide on one side and a parts map and paint list on the other. The kit is packaged in a sturdy cardboard box with the box art printed on a lightweight cardboard cover. Parts will need cleanup of mold parting lines, but there are no sink marks or flash. The kit parts are molded crisply with good detail. I was particularly impressed with the sculpting of the faces. A well-sculpted face is far easier to paint than one with vague features. The faces in this kit were a joy to paint. The fit of the kit's parts is generally good. The figures are designed so that most seams fall at the edges of straps, belts, or where seams in the clothing would be. I did need to use a small amount of filler on some of the figures' butts and on the elbows of the saluting arms. Once assembled, the figures have natural-looking poses. When assembling the man carrying the ladder, I had trouble getting his right hand to rest against the surface of the ladder. I fixed this by cutting at the wrist to reposition the hand. The paint set comes in a small rectangular box with examples of the included colors printed on the front and a painting guide for their figure kit on the back. The set includes 6 12-milliliter bottles of paint. The bottles are open-topped, no dropper tips. The undersides of the lids have a raised ridge that does a pretty good job of keeping the paint from getting on the threads of the lids. The included colors are saddle brown, oily steel, green brown, hull red, buff, and U.S. dark green. The instructions on the box advise that the paints are prepared for brush application and that they should be diluted with water or thinner 40 to 60% for airbrushing. The paints are thick, and I found them to need thinning for brush painting as well. Some paints were so thick that I needed to thin them before I could use a pipette to transfer them to my airbrush. I added a little water and a steel mixing ball to each bottle to make them easier to shake up before use. I tried various thinners for diluting the paint. The thinners intended for water-based acrylics that I tried, AK3G, Vallejo, and MIG, and tap water, all work well for this paint. I also tried rubbing alcohol, Tamiya X20, and Mr. Color Leveling Thinner. These thinners called the paint to break down or to clot. For testing these paints, I first primed the figures, then base coated them with their basic uniform colors using an airbrush. Since the consistency of the paint straight from the bottle is thick and varies from bottle to bottle, I can't give exact thinning ratios for airbrushing. Each paint will require some experimentation. Once thinned down to spray, the paints work as well as other water-based acrylics. The paints level out well as long as coats aren't too thick. I've tried paints from other ICM sets for painting camouflage patterns. I found that when spraying freehand, the edge of the spray pattern has a noticeable graininess to it. Varying thinners or adding retarder didn't seem to make much difference in how well the paint atomized. For spraying a multicolored camouflage pattern, masking would be required. I tried spraying very fine lines and models with this paint and found it to be challenging. I found it difficult to find the sweet spot between tip dry and spider webs. Someone who is used to using water-based acrylics for this sort of work may have better luck than me, but I couldn't pull it off. Adhesion over primer is good. Paint will pull up off unprimed areas. To finish the figures, I brush painted using the colors as recommended on the back of the paint box. The ICM paints went on smoothly when thinned with water on a wet palette. I mixed the ICM paints with AK3G and Vallejo acrylics with no problems. I expect that ICM paints can be freely mixed with other water-based acrylics too. The paints are thick, so transferring drops to a wet palette will make brush painting easier. The raised lip on the underside of the cap makes a convenient little paint reservoir for dipping the brush into. When painting small details, this is less wasteful than dispensing a drop from a dropper-style bottle that would mostly go to waste. The paints have good pigment density and have good opacity even when heavily thinned. The oily steel color has a noticeable graininess to it and may have a different medium than the non-metallic paints. It seems to have a greater surface tension than the other paints and can't be thinned as much before breaking down. It is still a useful paint, but not as easy to use as the non-metallic paints. The provided paints are good for the basic uniform colors and some of the details. To finish the set of figures as the box art illustrates will require some flesh tones, some dark and light colors for shadows and highlights, and a brass color for the sword hardware. Although marketed for Japanese uniforms, the colors in this set would be useful for a variety of subjects. Figures are a great way to add visual interest and a sense of scale to an aircraft build. Considering the number of 1/48th scale World War II Japanese Army Air Force airplane kits on the market and stacked up in stashes around the world, these figures and paints are very useful. I'd like to thank ICM and IPMS USA for providing these paints and figures for review. If you're interested in more reviews and news from IPMS USA, subscribe to this channel and click the bell icon for notifications. There are a lot more kit reviews on the IPMS USA Reviews page. To go there, you can click the link in this video's description. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.